Welcome to the Straight Arrow Bison Ranch. We are Marty and Karen Bredhauer and have lived here 5 miles south of Broken Bow since 1992. We are Christ followers, devoted to our family, and enjoy serving our customers. We got married in 1975, farmed with Marty's family east of Arcadia for 6 years, then became restless and ventured out on our own. We purchased a section of land, 640 acres, north of Broken Bow in 1980, which included about 100 acres of cropland and the remainder in pasture. Inflation and interest were high, but so were land and commodity prices. We raised dryland corn, had a mixed cow-calf herd, and a small farrowing operation. It only took 3 or 4 years to lose most of it through severe weather, declining prices, and continued high interest rates. We relinquished ownership of our land in 1985, but were able to continue renting it for a few more years. In 1989, we made another land purchase, 320 acres of pasture south of Broken Bow. This half section had a perimeter fence and 2 windmills and nothing else. No buildings, corrals, or cross fences. It was a blank slate, ready for our new dreams. We first built a fence that divided the pasture in half. We purchased some beef yearlings to run in the pasture through the summer, selling them in the fall. We built a corral around one of the windmills so we could round them up to load them out in the fall. We also began making plans to build a house. It was obvious that we were always going to be at the mercy of the markets for both buying and selling, with no opportunity to determine our prices. So in 1993, we began looking for alternatives to the traditional livestock. Many others were in the same situation, and there were several alternatives being promoted. Ostrich and emus were promoted for their healthier red meat and valuable feathers and eggs. Llamas and alpacas were promoted for their wool. Fish farming was promoted for the health benefits of the fish, but it required building and maintaining ponds in Nebraska desert land and processing the fish yourself. Elk were also being promoted. Part of the profitability of elk was collecting the velvet from the antlers. This was used for making some kind of health pills that promised to cure any ailments you might have. Then a family vacation to Fort Robinson introduced us to the possibility of raising bison. It sounded rather exotic, but we began to do the research. We also found opportunities to eat some in different recipes. I figured if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be able to sell it with a clear conscience. We found it to be very good with no wild flavor. We liked it. And we figured if anything could survive in Nebraska's wild weather, it would be the bison. A few months later, we purchased our first 4 bison, a 3-year-old cow with a young heifer calf, a yearling bull, and a 3-year-old bull. We were off and running. We soon found that bison and cattle do not make the best pasture mates, so we slowly added to our bison herd and got out of the cattle business. Our sons, Troy and Lance, ages 9 and 12, were also excited about the new venture. Our chosen name, Straight Arrow Bison Ranch, came partly from the verse, Psalm 127, 4 and 5, like arrows in the hands of a warrior are sons born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. Now our quiver is full with 2 sons, 2 daughters, 2 in-laws, and 8 grandchildren. We recently had an open house to celebrate 30 years of business, which involved all of them. We also thought of Broken Bow, the name of our town, needed a straight arrow. From the start, our marketing plan was to sell the meat. This was a decision that carried us through the ups and downs of the breeding market for the next few years. There was a lot of excitement from people getting into the bison business. including Ted Turner, filling several ranches in Nebraska and other states. Once that market was saturated, the prices of breeding animals dropped off sharply, but the meat market remained fairly steady. We introduced our products to the public in February 1995 after having butchered our younger bull. Custom Pack in Hastings had recently started processing bison. We learned the business of retailing bison along with them as we listened to our customers and adapted our packages to their suggestions. We were able to use Custom Pack for our processing for the next 25 years until it changed hands and stopped doing the custom processing. We started with a stock trailer with 1 freezer, then advanced to a utility trailer with 3 freezers. With these, we began a regular schedule of going to Grand Island, Kearney, and North Platte. In 2010, we had a log cabin trailer specially built for year-round use. We call this our mobile store. It has 3 freezers, a refrigerator, heating and air conditioning, and a bathroom. It makes selling meat much more comfortable in Nebraska's summers and winters. In the beginning, we thought bison should be raised like beef cattle. We tried weaning the calves once. We preg-checked the cows once. We fed the meat animals corn for a few years. But we gradually found that bison are not beef, and they do not flourish with traditional beef stockmanship. Bison are a wild species and cannot be domesticated like cattle. The first chapter in Genesis says God created the beasts, wild creatures, and the livestock. They were separate species from the start. As a wild species, they must be handled by respecting their natural instincts and convincing them that they want to do what you want them to do. We must manipulate the circumstances to convince them to go where we want them to go. So now, the whole herd stays together year-round. The calves are not weaned. The bulls are not removed from the herd. By their natural instincts, the cows cycle and breed in July to August and calve in May to June. We do not vaccinate, castrate, dehorn, or medicate. We put apple cider vinegar in their water supply and feed a good mineral program. In the 15 or so years that we have been giving the vinegar, we have not had any illness that required medical treatment. When a fecal sample showed internal parasites, Marty increased the vinegar and added a high copper mineral. A month later, the parasites were gone. If flies get bad, garlic added to the mineral can help decrease them. We have not used a needle on any of them in probably 20 years. When it is time to butcher them, we do a field harvest. Marty goes out to the pasture with his tractor, loader, and rifle. He positions the tractor to isolate the one he wants to shoot. 1 shot behind the ear puts it down. He then bleeds it, ties it onto the loader, and carries it back to a state-inspected facility where we have a professional butcher dress it out. He goes back out an hour later to get another one. All the while, the herd is still grazing, undisturbed. Once every 2 years, we bring the whole herd into the corrals to ear tag 2 years of calves. The reason for this is that we can easily identify the babies and the 1-year-olds, but by the time they are 1.5 to 2 years old, sometimes it is more difficult. We butchered the 2.5-year-olds. The tags identify the year they were born. They also make it possible to keep track of which cows have had calves each year. We were learning about the bison and attracting a following of customers, but we were not gaining ground financially. Why? In an effort to figure it out, we took a business class called EDGE, Educating, Developing, and Growing Entrepreneurs, EDGE. It was sponsored in part by the Cooperative Extension Educators. In this class, we learned to write a business plan with financial projections and record keeping. We're slow learners, so we took the class twice, in 1995 and again in 1997. We found out we were good at writing a business plan. We took third place in the state the first time and first place the second time we took the class in a contest of business plans. I must add that we are not so good at always sticking to the plan. But it was excellent information on budgeting, marketing, advertising, and so forth. It also forced us to write a mission statement for our business and look at our core values. We decided our primary goal is to be good stewards of what God has given us. That was 300 acres of grazing land, and we wanted to make the most of it. Marty took a class on holistic range management, which helped make some changes in our pasture management. By this time, he had subdivided the pasture into 8 paddocks, all leading to a central tank. As a result of what he had learned in this class, he divided each paddock again and added tanks supplied by underground water lines to the far parts of the pasture. This allowed the animals to graze all parts of the pasture more effectively, thus reducing the need for purchased hay. We have been to numerous conferences over the years and read a lot of Acres magazines and Stockman Grass Farmer magazines to learn more about healthy soils and forages. There's always more to learn. However, these are some of the practices we have found to be beneficial. First, non-chemical weed control. We have 2 certifications, Animal Welfare Approved and Grass-Fed Bison. These are both from an organization called A Greener World. Part of the criteria is to not use any chemical herbicides in areas where animals are grazing. So we have to manage the problematic vegetation in other ways. Cedar trees and yuccas are invasive in many pastures here in Nebraska, but the bison themselves take care of these plants. We have none of them in our pasture, although they are right across the fence in the neighbor's pasture. The bison we know eat the yucca root. We're not sure what they do to the cedar trees, but we have none of them in our pasture. For leafy spurge, we spray with a 45% vinegar solution. This is not species specific, so it will kill the other vegetation around it, but the grass always comes back. A spade keeps musk thistles under control. Some years, it may look like the pasture is being taken over by other plants such as sunflowers or curly-cup gumweed. We have just kept up our rotational grazing, and in a year or two, these weeds have decreased and not increased. Soil fertility. In 2016, we applied for and received a grant from SARE, S-A-R-E, which is Sustainable Ag Research and Education. Because this is a research-based grant, our research was to compare 3 different types of natural additives to different areas of the pasture and compare them to each other and to a control area with nothing added. The 3 additives were number 1, a biological solution of fish emulsion, raw milk, and molasses. Number 2, sea minerals. Number 3, a product called Mycor Plus, which contains both sea minerals and a natural biological product. Its main purpose is to stimulate the growth of mycorrhizal fungi. We kept records of soil samples, pictures, and costs of each additive. After 2 years, all areas improved, including the control areas. We could not see a distinct difference between the areas in the pasture. The second year of the grant, 2017, we applied each of these products side by side to some shrubs which we had planted a couple years earlier. We mowed the grass between the rows of shrubs in May before the applications. That was a year of severe drought, and the grass we had mowed did not even grow back. It was difficult to see a distinct difference between the areas. However, now, 7 years later, there is a noticeable difference. The Mycor Plus product has bushier shrubs with the biological mixture close behind. The control area and the sea minerals areas are definitely behind in growth. We have continued to use the Mycor Plus on a rotating basis throughout all the areas of the pasture for the past 7 years, and our soil samples have continued to show improvement in organic matter and soil health. The other benefit we have seen is an increase of 100 pounds in the average carcass weight of our meat animals since 2016, indicating that our animals are much healthier. Optimizing our resources. I should mention here that Marty's education is that of a tool and die maker. He worked at Becton Dickinson for about 27 years as such. He can build or fix almost anything. My education is in nursing, and I worked as an RN for over 20 years. I am an avowed health nut and recently found out I am crunchy. Those traits played into this next part. First, the total grass feeding. After the first few years of feeding grain to our meat animals, I was reading a lot about the health benefits of total grass-fed meat, but our processor discouraged us from doing that, saying the meat would be rubbery. The turning point for us on that was twofold. First, the price of corn increased to $7 to $8 a bushel. The second was we had a couple of our 2-year-olds get away from the corn feeding pen. After spending the summer on grass with no grain, we butchered them, and we could not tell any difference between the flavor or texture of the meat from the grass-fed to the grain-fed animals. That was the end of grain feeding. Many of our customers now come to us specifically looking for grain-free and antibiotic-free meat. We've also added several value-added products. When bone broth began to be touted as the ultimate health food, I began experimenting with making it from our bison bones. We got a USDA value-added grant in 2020, which helped pay for nutrition testing, development of promotional materials, packaging, and production labor. That, of course, was the year COVID hit, so we were not able to go to as many events to promote our product as we had planned, but it did give us time to fine-tune our packaging. We bought a freeze dryer to freeze dry the bone broth to make it shelf stable and easier to ship. We also found that in making the bone broth, we had 2 other valuable products: the tallow, which we skimmed off the top, and the mush left after the bones were removed and the broth was skimmed off. This mush contained the bone marrow, cartilage, bits of meat, and other pieces from the bones. And while it is not very appealing to people, it is high in nutrition and loved by dogs and chickens. The marrow mush is also freeze-dried. We make soap from the tallow and have recently started making tallow balm also. Each new product requires some creativity in packaging, labeling, and promoting, so we are still working on some of those steps. Finally, one more way we are utilizing the resources we have is to share them with others through our Airbnb rental units. Never underestimate the value of the view. We erected a building in 2016 for the primary purpose of butchering our animals. It included space for a kitchen, which became our commercial kitchen for making bone broth and other products. There was a space over the kitchen which we finished into a loft area with a sofa, hide-a-bed, bathroom, kitchenette, and sitting dining area. We didn't know what we would use it for, other than family visiting, but someone told us about Airbnb. I didn't think many people would go out of their way to drive 5 miles out of town to stay on a ranch, but they do. We named it The Nest. We get lots of 5-star reviews stating they love the view and the peacefulness of the ranch atmosphere. We also began to have inquiries for longer stays for people working in the area. We have another area on the property that has a panoramic view of nearly half of the ranch. So in 2022, we started building 2 yurts. These round tent-like structures have nearly 600 square feet of space, almost twice the space of the nest, and include a bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, dining, living area. They also share a center building with laundry facilities and a storm shelter. These have been in service for just a year, but they are also getting great reviews. So there you have it, a summary of the evolution of the Straight Arrow Bison Ranch. It hasn't been a gold mine or even an oil well, but it has been a great life.